Thank you. Commissioner Smith, I saw you just joined us. Can we do a quick audio and video check for you, please? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you so much.
Thank
You guys hear me?
Commissioner Ramos, yes, we can hear and see you now. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Slatic. Can we do a quick audio check?
Now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much. Emily, can we do a quick audio check, please?
Good morning, Alex.
Good morning. We can hear and see you fine. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I do believe we have some other members coming in, but it is 9:30. We are live streaming and recording live to YouTube. I'll pass things over to you to begin whenever you believe you want to start.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this virtual MetroPlan Orlando MAC meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Keith Trace, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. We also have a team of folks working to ensure this meeting runs smoothly. Today's meeting was advertised on MetroPlan Orlando's website and social media, as well as through targeted emails. Florida Sunshine Law requires a quorum to be physically present in a room for a government meeting. Governor DeSantis suspended this requirement through an executive order, allowing government boards to conduct business using virtual meetings. That order expired October 31st, so this meeting is being held in a workshop type format. Now it's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. And do we have Mayor Phil Anderson here today? Is he in yet?
Mr. Chair, don't believe he is dialed in as of yet.
All right. Well, Ms. Sladek, you're top on my little video screen. Would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you very much for filling in for us. At today's meeting, we'll keep microphones muted unless you've been recognized to speak, and we'll use the raise hands feature to participate in discussion. There are 2 public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public who want to speak will use the raise hands function on their Zoom screen. If you're attending by phone, you can hit the *9 to raise your hand, and your request will be recognized. When you're called, your microphone will be temporarily unmuted by staff, and we'll ask you to state your name and contact information for the record. We also accepted comments by email and phone messages before the meeting, and the guidelines for public comments are posted at our website, metroplanorlando.org/virtual meetings. We want this and all future online meetings to be accessible by all. Participants may join by computer, tablet, or phone. If you need accommodations to participate in the future, please contact MetroPlan Orlando staff. At this time, I'd like to recognize Alex Trauger with MetroPlan Orlando staff for the agenda review.
Thanks. Good morning, Chairman Trace, committee members, and all those attending online. Thank you again for working with us as we conduct these virtual meetings. This should actually be our last one for the foreseeable future. We'll talk about that a little later on in the agenda. But either way, we appreciate your patience and understanding as we produce these virtual forums. Based on the direction from our board at their December meeting, this meeting, as the chairman mentioned, is in a virtual workshop format, which all actions will be reviewed and discussed, but no formal action will be taken. So a quorum is actually not required today, even though we do have one. But as I mentioned before, our board's action on these items will be ratified at your next in-person MAC meeting. As the chairman mentioned, today we'll be using those raised hand feature to be recognized, during the meeting, to call on members of the public during that comment time. If you've joined us on the phone, without a video screen, please use *6 to mute and unmute your line, and please use *9 to raise your virtual hand so the meeting hosts can see and wish that you'd like to be recognized. You'll see there's also a chat feature in the toolbar. I think we've all come to know to only use this if you're having technical issues or need assistance, as that chat record does become part of the full public record of this meeting. In regards to today's agenda, we do have 2 casting changes to the printed agenda relating to items 8B and 8C. Mr. Nick Lepp will be presenting the preview of the prioritized project list, and Miss Emily Brown will be representing the Central Florida Expressway Authority today. With that being said, that completes my announcements, and we have no further changes to the agenda. We'd now like to take attendance, so I will ask Ms. Goldfarb to call the roll. Thank you.
I'll ask all committee members to please go ahead and unmute yourselves now for the roll call, and you can go on mute again after your name is called. Please make sure your video is on if possible so we can confirm it's you. You'll find the unmute and video buttons on your Zoom screen. Please say here or present when your name is called. Anderson? Forgetting?
Here.
Cole? Dallas?
Present.
Drummond? Foraker? Henson?
Here.
McCann?
Here.
O'Brien? Ramos?
Present.
Sladek?
Oh, here.
Smith?
Here.
Trace?
Here.
That concludes the roll call.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Goldfarb. We will now hear public comment that we normally call on what we normally call action items, but in this format, it's items for review and or discussion. Do we have any attendees in the audience that wish to speak on any of these items? If so, please use the raise hand function on your screen or press *9 on your phone keypad. When we call your name, the host will unmute your microphone. You will see a button pop up that says the host wants to unmute you. Please accept, and that'll activate your microphone. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record. Please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. Are there any attendees that wish to speak in the public comment portion?
We have no hands raised, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Up next is reports from our agency partners. FDOT and Florida Turnpike are making presentations later on this agenda. So if you'd rather defer your comments until then, that's perfectly fine with me. Ms. Hinson from FDOT, you're up first.
Hi, good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, Chairman and committee members. The only additional comment that I'd like to make, like you said, in addition to the prepared presentations, is to inform the members of the availability of grant funding for the High Visibility Enforcement Grant. It's a program partnership with the Department of Transportation and law enforcement that provides funding to local law enforcement agencies to be able to supplement officers' pay for specific areas to do enforcement and education in those areas. If anyone is interested in information, I have talking points. There's a one pager that goes out as well. And I also have a listing of roundtables that will happen throughout the state of Florida in regards to more information to everyone. So if anyone's interested, please just shoot me an email and I'll be more than happy to send that information over to you.
All right. I'm actually interested for the city of St. Cloud. Could you please send that to Alex or myself?
Absolutely.
All right.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, and I'll disseminate that to all of our MAC municipalities.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ms. Henson. Up next is Florida Turnpike Enterprise, Mr. Saosi.
Good morning, committee members. Florida's Turnpike Enterprise has opened 3 new ramps at the Turnpike Main Line and Central Florida Greenway, State Road 417. These ramps will accommodate future growth in the region, improve access to areas along the Central Florida Greenway for residents as well as tourists, and encourage economic development. The ramps provide the following options for drivers at exit 251. So northbound Florida's Turnpike, there's an exit ramp to southbound of the Greenway, and southbound of the Turnpike Main Line, there's an exit ramp to northbound of the Greenway, and southbound of the Turnpike Main Line, there's an exit ramp to southbound of the Greenway. Also, as part of the project, the Turnpike Main Line has been widened from Osceola Parkway to the Beachline Expressway from 4 to 8 lanes, which will reduce congestion and greatly increase traffic flow through the busy area. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Fine. I think you are my favorite person. I take the Turnpike 4, 8, 12 times a day. So that is very much appreciated to have that interchange open and those lanes open. All right, up next is Mr. Miles O'Keefe with links.
Morning, everyone. I have just a few items I'd like to share with the group. In terms of links ridership, we continue to hover around 50% of pre-pandemic levels. So that means we're seeing about 42 to 45,000 daily trips. March of 2020, right before everything went south, we were seeing about 76,000 trips per day. Related to the COVID-19 pandemic, just earlier this week on June 1st, Links kicked off its Ride with Confidence campaign. And it's an initiative to target customers who may be hesitant to ride Links as often or at all compared to where they were maybe a little over a year ago. So we're just trying to highlight where Links has been, what we're doing to ensure their safety and the cleanliness of the vehicles and the safety of obviously our operators and the passengers. In addition, on another COVID topic, in May, on May 11th and 12th, with the help of the city of Orlando, we hosted a vaccine event at Links Central Station. So one of the days they used an unoccupied bus bay, set up tents, waiting areas, refreshments for those choosing to get their vaccine. The following day, we held it within the terminal itself. They provided the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for ease of the customers at that 2-day event. In addition, yet another COVID topic, Links will be starting a COVID-19 survey, a web-based survey next week. This is again related to the ridership. We're just seeking how the pandemic impacted mostly our passengers, but the community at large, their travel patterns as it pertains to public transportation. So what routes were they riding? How has it changed? What are the reasons that they may not be riding as much as they used to? This will help us plan for the types of macro events that might impact or influence people to return. It could be as simple as lack of employment in their respective fields. If it's perceived safety, or maybe it's just they haven't gotten their vaccine yet. So that'll help us be prepared so we're not caught with the inappropriate amount of resources to meet the community's needs. Last piece, not COVID related, we just began on May 17th, reconstruction of the Rosemont Superstop. So this is expected to take 2 to 3 months. There's a temporary stop nearby that's been established, but this is really geared towards safety of the community around the Superstop, but as well as those waiting. So a lot more lighting, a lot more pedestrian-friendly infrastructure being installed at this site. So we're very excited to have that underway. And that completes my update. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Keefe. Does anyone have any questions? All right, moving on. We have 3 items for review and or discussion today. The first item are the minutes from our May 6th meeting, which are on tab 1 of your agenda packet. I hope you all had a chance to review them. Are there any corrections or revisions that need to be brought to staff's attention?
Move approval.
I don't believe we need to approve these, as this is a workshop format, but if anyone has any comments, we'll make those changes. And we'll bring that back for formal approval along with the minutes from the past pretty much year at our next meeting. All right. Up next on tab 2 is the FDOT amendment to the 2020, 2021 to 2024-25 TIP found in tab 2 of your agendas. Mr. Keith Caskey from MetroPlan Orlando staff will present this information. If you have any questions for him, please wait until the presentation is completed. And we're away.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This amendment includes a resurfacing project on State Road 46 in Sanford, and that includes bike ped and safety improvements as well. And then the other project is the Sunset Drive Livable Streets project in Castleberry, and this just involves moving the current construction funding for this project from the existing project number to a new project number. And you all have the information on this in your in tab 2 in your agenda packets. So with that, we'll open it up for questions.
All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Caskey. Our next item are the plan revisions to the 2045 MTP found on tab 3 of your agenda. Mr. Trauger will present this information. Again, please hold questions till the end for Mr. Trauger, and have a way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is normally, if we were in person, I'd walk from the table to the podium. So I did change rooms if anyone's noticed. But today we are proposing multiple plan revisions, amendments, and modifications to our adopted 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. In the next slide, a little bit of background. We adopted our plan unanimously approved by our board in December of 2020 at their December 9th meeting. But following that meeting, we heard additional feedback from our local partners, as it pertains to our implementing program, our local agency program. And we also received some feedback from the Federal Highway Administration and some clarity as it relates to consistency between our planning documents, specifically the Transportation Improvement Program and our long-range plan, the 2045 MTP. So based on that feedback that we received, we looked at how that would impact and change our planning documents. So with that, I'll go to the next slide and I'll provide a little more clarity on some terminologies because we have 2 different types of plan revisions today. And these are kind of legal terms as it relates to our planning process. The first is a modification, an administrative modification, and these are really just minor changes, no significant impacts to project cost or implementation schedules. And then we have what we call an amendment, and these are more significant major changes to cost sequencing and scheduling of projects. So today you'll probably hear me use both of these terms, and in tab 3 of your agenda packet provides more detail about the amendments in question, but we have both a modification and amendments today. So the next slide really provides an overview of the proposed revisions. The first is a modification, and this was probably the catalyst of this plan revision process, and that was to better include our adopted Transportation Improvement Program, a snapshot of that TIP included in our existing plus committed network. Initially, we only had projects that required funding beyond 2026 in that plan to show kind of consistency and as projects transition from short-term to long-term plans. But we included our entire TIP in each of our project lists. So that added 20, 30 pages of existing plus committed projects, but does provide that record, transparent record of projects, short-term and long-term. The second is an amendment, and that is a change to our off-system construction assistance program. As adopted, that program was construction of capacity project, widening projects only. But based on feedback from our local partners, we've brought in that program to all multimodal project types. So that will really allow us to tap into those federal funds and use those funds off system. As Nick will talk about later on today, those funds can also be used as match funds for trip type projects. So it's going to provide some flexibility, but also some investment power for us to really move through some of those projects that have been kind of looming for a while that haven't had a really targeted funding source. The third is also an amendment, and these were changes to our local projects. Based on various circumstances. Some projects were removed because they're no longer seeking federal or state funding. Others were more editorial, changing street names, things like that. And then the final modification relates to our congestion management process, which is an element of our short-term and long-range planning process. And what we did is we updated the data source for a couple of the indicators there pertaining to emergency response and roadway clearance times. So we originally pulled that data directly from the DOT database, SunGuide database, but now we're coordinating more closely with the FDOT District 5 Transportation Incident Management Coordinator to make sure that we're reporting, where both agencies are reporting that information accurately. So those are our modifications and plan amendments, plan revisions today. I think also something notable to MAC, one of the plan revisions that doesn't impact cost feasibility, but that's kind of relevant to kind of the Belle Isle Edgewood area would be the intersection, Orange Avenue intersection at Holden and Gatlin. That one was cost feasible in the plan, remains cost feasible, but we actually have to increase the construction cost to ensure that the rail relocation was included in that project. So again, that project remains cost feasible, but Mayor Dallas and Mayor Foraker, that project has been updated and it remains cost feasible and is more true to the type of project and construction that's going to be required to improve the conditions at that intersection. So that's all I have for you today. Being more than happy to field any questions. This will be an action item to our board, but for today's virtual workshop purposes, we're just seeking your feedback so your chair can report that to the board at their meeting next week. But more than happy to field any questions, but we're looking for your consensus today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Trauger. Does anyone have any questions or comments for staff? All righty. Seeing none, we'll move on to our presentations, and we have 3 presentations today. If you would like to speak on any item, please use the raise hand function, and you will be recognized. We'll hold all questions until the end, as with the other presentations. And if you're having audio issues, you can type into the chat box as well. Up first is the review of the 2022 to 26 TIP by Mr. Keith Caskey.
Okay, well, good morning again. Just wanted to give you all a preview of the new 2022 to 2026 TIP. And on your agenda, there's a link where you can review the main sections of the draft document. And this will be coming back for review and action at the June-July round of meetings. And just to get the slide to advance here. To start off with an overview, the TIP is one of the main documents that we as an NPO are required to produce based on federal and state legislation. And the purpose of the TIP is to identify all the transportation projects that are funded in our region over the next 5 years with federal or state funds. Any federal or state funded transportation project has to be included in our TIP. And then we have the option to include locally funded projects in the TIP for information purposes. And we've always done that since those are important projects as well. And then the TIP is updated on an annual basis. So we will be back about this time next year with a preview of another new TIP. Now, this slide shows the amount of federal and state funds that are programmed over the 5 years of the TIP. And this is broken out according to the major categories of projects in the document. And all of these federal and state funded transportation projects have to be approved by our board to be included in the TIP in order for these projects to move forward and be implemented. And this amounts to over $3 billion worth of projects. Now, the process of developing this new TIP actually started last year when we put together the fiscal year 2026 to 2040 prioritized project list. And the prioritized project list is another document that we update every year, and you'll be hearing the preview of the new prioritized project list in the next presentation, but this is the one from last year. And we like to call this a bridge document because it kind of fills in the gap between the TIP, which covers the next 5 years, and what we used to call our long-range transportation plan and now call our metropolitan transportation plan, which has a target year at least 20 to 25 years out in the future. And the list includes projects that were either completely unfunded or had unfunded phases in the 5-year work program and TIP as of last year. And this includes a list of highway projects, transportation system management and operations projects, and then we also have bike and ped and transit projects. And the projects on each of these separate lists were ranked by priority as candidates for funding in this new TIP. And this was used by FDOT to develop their 2022 to 2026 tentative 5-year work program. And then we used the work program to put together the new TIP. Now, I wanted to start off by looking at the highway projects that were in last year's prioritized project list. And these are divided into 3 main categories. The National Highway System projects are major capacity improvements on I-4. So these are primarily the beyond the ultimate improvements that involve the 6 general use lanes, 4 managed toll lanes, and reconstructing the interchanges. And then there's also a truck parking facilities project as well. Then there's a list of projects on the state roadway system. And this is a mixture of different types of projects. Some of these involve widening roadways from 2 lanes to 4 lanes or 4 lanes to 6 lanes. But the majority of these projects are non-capacity, what we call context-sensitive or complete streets projects, which are designed to help improve safety and traffic flow within existing roadway corridors without adding capacity. So these can include a combination of different types of projects, like such as minor intersection improvements, putting in sidewalks and bike lanes and bus pull-offs and so on, depending on how much space is available within the corridor. And then there's a similar list of different types of projects on roadways that are mainly off the state road system. And on your agenda, there's also a link where you can review last year's prioritized project list, which I went through and updated to highlight those projects that have had significant changes since last year. So for the purpose of this presentation today, I'm mainly just going to focus on those projects that have had new phases funded in the new TIP. So for the National Highway System projects on I-4, the only project on that list that had a new phase funded is the construction of truck parking facilities in the I-4 corridor throughout our 3-county area and also extends into Volusia County. And FDOT has program funding for construction for this project in fiscal year 2026. And then for the Beyond the Ultimate projects, these are all still funded through right-of-way, so there weren't any major changes for those projects. But I did want to point out that for priority number 4 is the BTU segment from east of State Road 434 to Seminole-Volusia County line. That project is now funded through right-of-way through fiscal year 2026. And last year and in previous years, that project was only partially funded through right-of-way, and now the right-of-way phase is fully funded for that project. Then we have the projects on the state roadway system, and there were 4 projects on that list that I found that have new phases funded in the new TIP. These include number 3, which is the 4-laning of 1792 from the Polk Osceola County line to west of Poinciana Boulevard in Osceola County. And that project is now funded through design in fiscal year 2026. And that's also true of priority number 5, which is the 6-laning of State Road 535 from US 192 in Osceola County up to World Drive in Orange County. Then number 6 is the intersection improvement on State Road 434 and Ronald Reagan Boulevard in Longwood. and that project is now funded through right-of-way in fiscal year 2022. And then number 16 is the context-sensitive improvements project on Robinson Street from Garland Avenue to Crystal Lake Drive near downtown Orlando. And that has construction funds program in fiscal year 2024. Then we have the list of projects that are mainly off the state road system. One exception to that is the number 2 priority, which is the context-sensitive improvement project on State Road 434 from State Road 417 to Franklin Street in the Winter Springs, Oviedo area. And that project is now funded through right-of-way in fiscal year 2025. And this context-sensitive project is the interim project prior to the 4-laning of this same segment of State Road 434. And the 434 4-laning project is included on our list of state roadway projects. And this interim project, the Seminole County staff requested that this context-sensitive project be put on the off-system list so it could be funded more quickly. Then I combined priorities 3 and 4, which are the context-sensitive improvements on Virginia Drive, Forest Avenue, and Corinne Drive from Orange Avenue to Bennett Road in Orlando. This project is partially funded through construction in fiscal year 2026, has about $3.5 million in federal SU funds program for construction, and the total construction cost for the entire project is somewhere around $9 million. Then priority number 5 is the context-sensitive project on East Church Avenue in Longwood. That's funded for construction in 2025. And then number 15 is the context-sensitive project on Orange Boulevard near Sanford, which is funded for construction in 2026. And then number 20 is the context-sensitive project on Warren Avenue in Longwood. This project currently has a planning study underway, and the design phase for this project is now funded in 2025. Then we have what we call the TSMO projects, the Transportation System Management and Operation projects. And these are relatively low-cost projects. So they have a total cost of up to around $4 million or less. And these are designed to help improve safety and traffic flow. And they include projects like minor intersection improvements, traffic signalization projects, putting in dynamic message signs and infrastructure for connected and autonomous vehicles and things of that nature. And under this category, we have a list of county-wide and city-wide projects. And the first 2 priorities on that list are the upgrades to Orange County's traffic signal cabinets. And that project is now funded for construction in 2025. And then under other TSMO projects, there are 2 projects, both in Osceola County, that have new phases funded. Number 4 is the adopted signal system on Osceola Parkway, which is now funded for design. And number 11 is roundabouts on Marigold Avenue in Poinciana, and that's now funded for construction. Then we have regional trail and school mobility projects. And there are 4 school mobility projects that have new phases funded. And these are all sidewalk projects near elementary schools in Osceola County. And 3 of these projects are now funded through construction, and the other project has a new design phase funded. And then there are 5 regional trail projects that are all now funded for construction. 3 of these are in Orange County, and they include the Little Econ Trail Phase 3, the Sandspur Trail in Maitland, and the Shingle Creek Kirkman Trail. And then the other 2 are both in Seminole County, and these include the Central Castleberry Connectivity Improvements and the Spring Lake Road Trail in Altamont Springs. And then for the transit projects, we have a list of projects that are implemented by links. And I'm not going to go through all those, but these include the purchase of buses and other vehicles, putting in transit centers and superstops, operating expenses and things of that nature. And then for the last several years, MetroPlan has had a policy of setting aside up to 30% of this area's district dedicated revenue funds, which are state funds, for the operation of premium transit projects. And premium transit projects are those projects that have been identified in our Metropolitan Transportation Plan as being over and above regular fixed route bus service. So these can include any type of rail transit, whether it's commuter rail, light rail, trolley systems, and so on, as well as bus rapid transit in an exclusive corridor and things of that nature. And these projects have been divided into 3 categories. And Category A are those premium transit projects that have had their planning and feasibility studies already completed. So these projects are the most furthest along, and so the most ready to use the DDR operating funds once they're up and running. And this list has been the same for the last few years, and there really weren't any changes to these projects. So I'm not going to go over the whole list, but we still have for the number one priority the Sunrail Phase 3, which would run from the Sunrail main line near the Meadowwood Station over to the Orlando International Airport. And this project may be done in conjunction with the Bright Line system that's also underway. And then we have for number 2, the OIA connector, which would most likely be a bus rapid transit system running from the Orange County Convention Center over to the airport. And then we have the US 192 BRT system in Osceola County. And then the other projects on that list, as I mentioned, have been on there for a while and there were no changes. And then category B are those projects that have not had their planning and feasibility studies completed yet. And so once those studies are completed, these projects can move up to category A and be eligible for the DDR operating funds. But right now they're not considered to be eligible for those funds. But the first 4 priorities on that list are the same as they've been for the last few years. We still have the Innovation Way Corridor Enhanced Transit Project in East Orange County. And then there are 3 projects along International Drive that are all being planned by Orange County. And then in last year's prioritized project list, there were 3 new projects added under category B. And these are all enhanced transit corridor studies along 3 different corridors in the region. These include US 1792 from downtown Orlando to State Road 436, then along US 441 from Apopka down to Florida Mall, and then the Pine Hills Kirkman Road corridor down to Universal Orlando. And then category C are those projects that are enhancements to Lynx's existing fixed route bus system. So these are not considered to be premium transit and are not eligible for the DDR operating funds. But these include the expansion of Lynx's existing fixed route bus fleet, as well as bus service expansion on various major corridors in the region that have been identified by Lynx. And finally, we have a list of locally funded roadway widening projects that are candidates for Transportation Regional Incentive Program or TRIP funds. And these are state funds that local jurisdictions can use for major transportation projects. But in order to use these funds, the local jurisdictions have to come up with at least 50% in local matching funds. And I did not see any of the projects on this list that received TRIP funds in the new 5-year work program. But I did want to mention that there was the 4-laning of Neptune Road from Parton Settlement Road to US 192 is now funded through Right-of-Way in fiscal year 2021. And the majority of the funds for this project are Osceola County's local funds, but this project did receive $500,000 in federal SU funds in a recent TIP amendment. And so that makes this project eligible to receive additional federal funding. So that's an overview of how some of the projects in last year's prioritized project list have had new phases funded in the new TIP. I did want to mention that, of course, this area has a lot of toll road facilities and projects, and I did not include those in the presentation today just in the interest of time, and since those are not part of the prioritized project list. But obviously those are very important projects, and we are including the Turnpike projects and the CFX projects in the TIP as well. And then we will be having our public meeting on the TIP. This will be a virtual meeting on our website. This will be on Monday, June 21st from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Of course, everyone's welcome to attend that, and we will be sending out additional information on that. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation, and at this point, I'll open it up for questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Caskey. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you very much. Up next, we have the preview of the 2027 to 2036 PPL by Mr. Nick Lepp of MetroPlan Orlando staff.
All right, good morning. Now that Keith has just gone over what's going to be in the next 5 years of the Transportation Improvement Program, we're going to talk about what's next. He did mention this is a year-long process, so I know we just talked about the next 5, but it's going to take us the rest of the year to get these programmed into the next Transportation Improvement Program. Next slide, please. So as Keith mentioned, the priority list is that bridge that gaps the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Transportation Improvement Program. The projects have to be identified as cost feasible in that MTP for them to make it into the Transportation Improvement Program. One new thing that's come out this year, since we have adopted a new MTP in December, the priority list now will be a 10-year priority list. Projects identified as cost feasible in the first 10 years are eligible to go into the Transportation Improvement Program. Those projects outside of there, the next 10 years between 2035 and 2045, are still identified as cost feasible, but would require an amendment for them to move forward based on performance-based planning for them to be entered into the Transportation Improvement Program. Next slide, please. So as I said, it's a direct linkage between the 2045 MTP going into that Transportation Improvement Program, which is that 5-year budget of projects that we have. They all support our goals and objectives that we've identified in this latest plan, and they're consistent with our funding policies. And I'll go over that. Not only do we have our TMA funding policies, but we have a couple new policies that we have put together through this program or through the MTP to help support local projects. Next slide, please. So through this, I mentioned performance-based planning. All projects are evaluated through our goals and objectives, which have performance measures attached to them. Each performance measure is worth at least a point, except there's some discussions on pedestrian safety to increase that. But at this point, what you're seeing is a draft priority list based on these performance measures and the evaluation of 2020 criteria to rank where these corridors may lie or these projects. Next slide, please. And Keith mentioned on system versus off system. What I want to just highlight with you is on the left side, we have our national highway system and state roads, which utilizes a large part of those DDR funds and federal funds, but represents about 720 miles of our network. The off system, which are all of the other federal aid eligible roadways, represent about twice that. And that's where we have our extra funding policies and go through some of those LAP programs. And I'll go over in a little bit more detail in these next couple slides. Next slide, please. So we have multiple lists. We allocate federal and state funds based on the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. They come in kind of two buckets of money. One, other arterials, which is kind of that transportation infrastructure bank that Florida has, mostly state funds and a combination of federal. And then we have our TMA funds, which are those urbanized area funds that come to the MPO based on the fact that we are a large urban area. And those can be utilized for more local roads and allocated to those local governments through that LAP program. We have widenings and complete streets on the state road system combined with TSMO projects, bicycle pedestrian trails, and also sun trail projects. So these will all be ranked and prioritized together on that one state road list for the Department of Transportation to program using those kind of other arterial funds. The other lists are developed for our Complete Streets program, our Sidewalks program and trails, as well as TSMO and transit, and those use our TMA urbanized area funds as we prioritize and program. Next slide, please. So within there, we've also pulled out a couple new programs. For the Department of Transportation, instead of just handing them a list of prioritized projects, we're boxing about $2 million a year to enhance the TSMO technology on the National Highway and State Road System. We've also kept that within our TSMO program with our signal retiming, adding for regional TSMO program, which is $1 million a year for some of that technology to go off system, as well as some ACES demonstration projects. Our Complete Street program remains the same. We're pulling out money for some corridor studies and data collection that we perform in-house. That would be kind of like the 10th Street study that's going on right now in St. Cloud. And we've also set up a new program that will start funding in 2025, 2026 for those safety emphasis corridors. And this is where we will work with our technical advisory committee members and look at projects to identify some of those safety hotspot needs. Alex did mention the new program, the off-system construction program. This uses 10% of those other arterial funds, or that big pot of money that DOT has for those other arterials, and we are pulling some of that aside based on their funding policy for off-system construction projects. It was originally adopted in the plan as an off-system widening program, but based on comments we've received from our local government partners, we've expanded that program for all projects as long as the local government has done the initial phases of PD&E, design, and right-of-way. We'll be able to support construction within that. Next slide, please. So on the national highway system, the updated ranked projects really didn't change too much. As Keith mentioned, the 434 at Franklin, which was on our multimodal TMA list, since it is a state road in the update of the plan, we have put that over into the state roadway list, so funded with the state road funds. As we can still continue with the 1792 four laning, as well as the John Young Parkway and Portage Road urban interchange are our highest priorities on the state road system, and continuing to advance the 535 project as well as Robinson Street. So those are the top projects for state roads. Next slide, please. And then I mentioned the other arterial program. This program doesn't have a list. This is going to be managed through MetroPlan and our local government partners. Once they've identified or demonstrated that the planning work, the environmental work, and as well as the right-of-way and design has either been completed or funded through a transportation improvement program, we can then start looking to program those funds for construction. Now, this program is a little bit larger than our traditional TMA programs, which have had a $4 million cap. We have an estimate between $14 and $20 million of federal SA funds that are usually available to this our region. And on top of that, these funds can be used to match those TRIP funds. So that 50% match that's usually required by the locals to use those TRIP funds for construction, we could use these SA funds. So this could start opening up those bigger TRIP projects, which included trail bridges on Shingle Creek. There were a couple widening projects off the system, Barack Obama Parkway, and then some out on the east side of Orlando, as well as other projects down in Osceola County. So this is a new program that should help advance those projects that we didn't have that mechanism for in our current planning products. Next slide, please. And then off-system construction assistance, as mentioned, these are the top roads that ranked in there. And these are based on information given to us from our local government partners, where they have already identified funding for those initial phases and are looking for assistance for construction. The funding will be available out in 25-26. So we'll be working with them to make sure all of the components are put together. Next slide, please. As for our TISMO and ITS improvements, off the top, we're still going to continue our traffic signal retiming program, as well as supporting that regional TISMO program, which will allow our local governments to purchase some of that equipment and technology needed to get our system up to those standards. We've also added that new automated and connected vehicle demonstration program. We're working with our technical advisory committees to find those next projects coming up. But then going forward, we still have our list of projects that are priorities for those funding of TMA funds, which include Pine Street, Canoe Creek, and Rosemont Drive, as we're looking to improve those intersections. Next slide, please. Our Complete Street program largely remains the same, still funded through our TMA funds. We're going to be assisting our local governments through studies, complete street studies or area-wide studies, very similar to 10th Street study we have going on now. And also still collecting and using that for performance measure data as we use this annually to do our rankings. Some of the top projects that came out this year was West Warren, made it up to the top of the list in the priority, as well as Central Ave down in Kissimmee. Michael Gladden in Apopka also rose up a little bit more with this new ranking system. But largely those projects have always been on there. They're just now starting to bubble up to the top. Next slide, please. For bicycle pedestrian improvements, we have a lot of other side programs, as well as we want to support our school mobility, and that's working with the Department of Transportation on projects that may not have made it for the Safe Routes to Schools program. We've allocated funding to make sure that those projects are still prioritized and moving forward, because they are important for the safe routes to schools for our children. We've also added a Sidewalk Gap Program. This will be new. We've identified within the entire region all of the sidewalk gaps that are out there on the federal aid system. And we've grouped them together in logical geographical areas so they could be easier to implement through this federal aid program for smaller pieces which are more difficult to federalize. Some of our top other projects are still advancing the Little Econ Trail, as well as Shingle Creek Kirkman Trail and the East-West Trail around Orlando, and still supporting the Department of Transportation on their connections of the Coast to Coast Trail through the two corridors, the Clarkona-Coe Connector and Pine Hills Phase 3, which are our last two segments within our region. Next slide, please. And then we've updated the links priority list. Based on what we've gone through on the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, we still have Sunrail Phase 3 as our top priority for premium transit, but links capital expenses and transit asset management is the first priority, making sure that they can maintain and keep their system going. But then going through the project, we figured out that the Southern Operation Base and the Northern Operation Bases are the two high priority transit projects which are needed for links to expand the system in any way beyond what they have going on right now. So before we start looking at some of those other possible routes, we need to make sure that they have the locations for their buses. Next slide, please. So that's a draft of how we have put together this new prioritization process. We know it's a little different since we have a new plan and new projects. We've submitted this all to our local governments. We're looking for feedback back on June 9th. And since we know this is a new process using a lot of performance measures, we've also posted in a GIS online platform on our website a link so you could look at all of the performance measures for each one of the segments out there within our region, and you can understand why and how these corridors were ranked and why these projects are now our top priorities going into the next year's work program cycle. So we'll be presenting this back to the board on July 7th for adoption. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leb. Does anyone have any questions for staff? And Alex, could you get that presentation to us as well? I'd like to review it again and then go through that GIS website as well. All right.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, I'll definitely provide that, similar to what we did after last meeting. And just one note before we go on to the next presentation. Mayor Sladek had a comment in the chat, and we did provide the updated link for that.
All right, thank you very much. Seeing no questions for Nick. Up next is the 2045 CFX Master Plan by Miss Emily Brown from CFX.
Good morning, all. Good morning, Chair Trace. It is good to see you. I wish I was in person. My apologies, I'm trying to turn my video back on. But in any event, thank you so much for having us here today. Can everybody hear me? I am not using headphones, so.
You're good.
Okay, as long as all the volume is good. So thank you so much for having us here today. The Central Florida Expressway Authority is currently engaging in a listening tour across our 5-county service area to gather input on the future of mobility for our region through pulling together our second master long-range plan, or 2045 master plan. The last one was done 6 years ago when we were just a brand new baby agency. So this is our second master plan and our first plan that also includes Brevard County. Next slide. For those of you that do not know, the Central Florida Expressway Authority was established by the legislature in 2014. CFX is an independent agency of the state of Florida. Next slide. And is locally governed by a 10-member board. We have a county commissioner from each of the 5 counties represented in our service area, along with the mayors from Orange County and the city of Orlando, and 3 appointees of the governor, including Jay Madera. And we had 2 new appointees named just 2 weeks ago. CJ Meyer, who actually served on the CAC over here at MetroPlan, I believe. And then Mr. Martinez, who came over from GOA. So lots of great infrastructure and telecom experience added to our board. We're excited to have them join us. Next slide. So CFX currently maintains and operates 125 centerline miles of expressway, serving 3 million residents at last count, and an estimated 75 million visitors pre-pandemic levels, but that is increasing very quickly across the 5 counties we serve. Again, Brevard, Lake Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and Orange County. Next slide. And again, as you all know and discuss very often, growth is a topic that is not going away in Central Florida. And again, at last count, according to the Orlando Economic Partnership, we were looking at as many as 1,500 residents a week, depending on the agency and the numbers. Those vary greatly, some as many as 900 new people coming here each day. Next slide. So it's imperative that we prepare for this growth, and the CFX master plan sets the course for the future, helping identify future transportation needs for our growing community. This master plan serves as the basis for the fully funded 5-year work plan, which is updated each and every fiscal year. We actually, at our May board meeting, just approved a $3.2 billion work program, which was the largest in agency history. And I have my apologies. Can you hear me with the earbuds in? That was pest control.
Oh, I was going to say the dog got the mailman.
Yes, no, it was just my cattle dog Zelda letting me know that pest control was here to save the day. Anyways, back to our fully funded 5-year work plan. We actually update that every fiscal year. Again, at our last board meeting, we approved a $3.2 billion work plan over the next 5 years that has projects, studies, and operations and maintenance across our 125-mile system, touching every single county in our system, which is really exciting. And the next year, we're actually letting out $1 billion in contracts for new development, right-of-way acquisition, and construction. So it's a really exciting time. But of course, that work plan is the fully funded work plans, reevaluated every fiscal year. And then that comes from our 15-year capital improvement plan, which ensures that all of the projects that we approve as part of our work plan are fully funded through completion. This is why your input is so important in creating this 2045 master plan. Is again, it guides the decisions for that 15-year capital improvement plan, and then down to that 5-year work plan that gets updated every year. So we need to know what priorities that money from our user-funded system is being directed towards. Back in 2016, CFX. Next slide. Thank you. So back in 2016, our agency again adopted our first ever long range plan, and it was adopted by the board back in 2016. This does not include Brevard County, who joined our system over in 2018. Following important input from stakeholders like you. We went as far west as Mascot, as far east as, Space Coast TPO. So we really do run the gamut. We have not come and presented to your jurisdiction yet, we are either in the process, we are either on a future agenda, or we are in the process of working with your staff to get that scheduled. Next slide. So from our 2040 master plan, the Expressway Authority identified 11 billion in total project needs in the 4-county service area alone, which would be Lake Osceola, Orange, and Seminole counties. After the adoption of our master plan, CFX is investing $2.5 billion in projects by 2025. So that is a huge capital investment for our community, and moving forward as we look to find, matches for other projects in our region, really those arterial roads. So some of these projects include major investments like the recently completed interchange at 417 and 408, which is a stunning entrance into the southern gateway into Central Florida, coming into the South Terminal at the airport. We also have the interchange at 528 and State Road 46, which is currently under construction. We had some ramps open last Friday. It's really exciting news. This was, again, a signature project for our region, as it is the gateway to Central Florida for those 75 million visitors who've come this year. Next slide. And then another huge policy change that came from the 2040 master plan was our board's adoption of our multimodal policy, which allows CFX to contemplate other modes of transportation within our right-of-way. This doesn't necessarily mean we're getting in the train business or the bus business or the trail business, but what it does mean is we have an opportunity to partner with other transportation providers across our service area to meet the needs of the transportation needs of the community. And a really good example of this is Brightline, our partnership with Brightline Trains coming up to 528 for that connection from West Palm to Orlando International Airport, which is under construction now. And if you haven't had a chance to drive down to South Florida recently, I highly recommend you take 528 down to 95, because it really is a very fascinating drive. If you are at all a policy transportation nerd like I am, because you can see the tracks going in, and it's really interesting. Next slide. And again, we served as the guide to numerous other initiatives. Next slide. Since 2016, our expressway system has expanded by 16 centerline miles with the completion of the Wekiva Parkway project, which is a project that's become known internationally as a model for sustainable infrastructure development. As Mr. Trace knows, we also added the addition of Poinciana Parkway to our system once OCF became absorbed and a full member, also can be a full member of the Central Florida Expressway system a couple of years ago. And we are working closely with Osceola County and the state in some projects in that area. And then we also had planned widening projects that will add 55 miles of additional capacity along the 417, the 429, and the 528, also known as the Beach Line. As many of you know, who are sitting on the virtual dais today, there has been even, even where we are in the pandemic cycle, we are back up to traffic numbers that are exceeding what they were in 2019. especially along traditionally commuter routes like 408 and 417 and 429, where growth has doubled 100% in 5 years. So the widening, those 55 miles of planned widening projects are going to be really vital to improving the connectivity and preparing for the growth that is coming to Central Florida. Next slide. And then again, we have 130 miles of new expressway location study areas that have been evaluated coming out of the 2040 Master Plan report and Governor Rick Scott's East Central Florida Regional Task Force that we are looking at in conjunction with various agencies and as part of other projects. Next slide. We've also completed several project development and environment studies, or more commonly known as PD&E studies, touching every county in our service area. Again, that's 5 counties, it's a very large service area, and any of our representatives on the dais today who live out in these areas know how far each of those PD&E studies is. But as you can see, it will one day complete a full beltway around Central Florida, which is really exciting. Several of these projects have actually become fully funded for design. The Lake Orange Expressway and the Poinciana Parkway extension are designed as we speak. Both are funded for construction in our current work program. Next slide. So looking ahead, how do you fit in? Really why we're here today is we want your input on the top transportation needs in your area, locations for new expressways or interchanges, and as we look to the future, what multimodal sustainability initiatives are a priority for you? What top strategies to ease traffic congestion? How do we prepare for autonomous vehicles? What multimodal and sustainability initiatives are a priority for you? Traffic congestion, autonomous vehicles, and we will work with staff over at MetroPlan to make sure that you all get a copy of that survey. Please feel free to share it with your commissions and councils, as we're interested in their input too. But again, if we have not already presented to your commissioner council, we either are on a future agenda or are working with staff to schedule a presentation. And with that, I open it up to questions.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you. Seeing no questions, that concludes today's presentations. In your agenda packet, there are several items in general information under tab 3. Those include the water quality report and a summary of the transportation related activities from the 2021 Florida legislative session. If you haven't reviewed that, there's a lot of good input on bills that passed and didn't pass and impacts for our local communities. Coming up next is our MAC meeting. Our next meeting will be July 1st, 2021. This meeting will be held in person and in the MetroPlan Orlando boardroom. MAC members are required to be present for that meeting to be considered present for accounting purposes. This meeting, members of the public may also attend in person or continue to meet virtually via Zoom. Staff will be sending out more details on health and safety related protocols for that July meeting. The next MetroPlan Orlando board meeting will be on June 9th. The board is also being held in a hybrid format with some board members, staff, and members of the public attending in person and others meeting via Zoom. Later this month, the MetroPlan Orlando staff will be hosting a virtual TIP meeting for the 2021-2022 through 25 and 6 TIP. Mr. Caskey mentioned that will be via Zoom on June 21st, 2021 from 11:30 to 1 p.m. At this time, do any committee members want to make any final comments or have questions for staff? If you do, please use your raised hand feature. And I see Mayor Sladek would like to ask a question.
Yes, I noticed that there is a date change on the 434 project coming through Oviedo. My understanding was that it was funded for 2023. So I was hoping to get clarification on if the funding for 2024-25 is for the actual widening or if that is for the 3 roundabouts.
Well, let me see if I can answer. I believe that is for the actual construction. What's being funded right now is design and right of way that's needed through 2022, 2023. And that should be collected through 23, and then we'll be able to go into the construction phase in 24, 25.
Okay, so the 24-25, that construction is the roundabouts, not the 4-laning. Am I understanding correctly?
You are correct. We do. The 4-laning is still out there as a long-term need, but the roundabouts is the interim complete street improvement that we're looking to construct through this tip.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Thank you for that, Mayor. Appreciate it.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair, this is Alex. I just wanted to just reiterate, some of your feedback about our next meeting, July 1st. As the chair mentioned, we are coming back face to face. Our board's resolution expires at the end of this month, so our MAC meeting will be our first of our, kind of back to business, face to face meetings. So again, you have to show up to be present. We will have kind of our virtual option to kind of keep members of the public engaged in our process. We've seen a lot more participation, so we're going to keep that going as we return to face-to-face meetings, but members must be present for quorum purposes. And that quorum is important more than ever, as we will be ratifying decisions of this body that took place over the past 10 to 12 months. So please keep that in mind. Kathy and I will be reaching out in advance, as we always do, to kind of poll for RSVP and purposes of that nature. So please RSVP so we can ensure we have a quorum, for that July meeting. So other than that, we'll be in touch with more information, as the chair mentioned, pertaining to health and safety protocols to come back to the office. But you'll hear more from staff about that. But that's it for me, Mr. Chair. I'll pass things back to you if there's any other members that have any other comments before we move on to general public comment.
All right. Were there any raised hands?
I'm not seeing any others.
All right, perfect. Up next is our second public comment portion. If any member of the public wishes to comment, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We will unmute your mic. After you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record, and please hold your comments to 2 minutes. Are there any raised hands or others wishing to speak?
We have no raised hands at this time. I'll give it another few seconds. And then while I'm waiting, we have not received any other written comments in advance of the meeting on action or general items, but give it another few seconds and then we'll. So seeing none, Mr. Chair.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And unless there is any further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.